Hi there, and welcome back to part 3 of the knurling tool. I did have a bit of a tidy up, as I was threatening to do, and I'm now going to tap the 2 holes in my base plate. It was a bit like a mini pallet, I suppose you'd call it, that the milling attachment sits on normally, but in this case I'm not going to use the milling attachment, but we'll come to that. Anyway, I was looking for a tap wrench and I picked up this old beast, which is, as you can imagine, way too big for an M8 tap really. And I've got another one here which I made as an apprentice. It's looking a bit old and battered, but then again so am I. But I'll show you that. A simple little thing if you haven't got a tap wrench. It's far better than these sort of ones you get in the Chinese kit, so to speak. And it's a simple thing to make. And there's an interesting history behind this one as well. I'll show you what they are to start with. Yeah, the homemade or apprentice-made one. I mean, good grief. I shudder to think how long I've had this, but it's probably more than 35 years. Anyway, it started out life. I think it was 2 lengths of. Let me think. I think it was like an 01 or a silver steel, something like that, 1/2 inch square. And then obviously they've been turned on either end, each piece, and they're both identical pieces. Then obviously there's a clearance hole. This is actually quarter width, but there was a clearance hole on quarter, and then a quarter width tap in that one, and then a clearance hole on a quarter and a quarter width tap in that one. So they are actually identical pieces. And then obviously I have filed a little square relief in the 2. Probably would have done these side by side with them bolted together, and filed one straight through. I can't remember how I made it, but filed one straight through V-groove. It would have been checked as an apprentice to make sure it was all square and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's the little homemade tap wrench. Simple little thing to make. You know, they had little champers on the ends and what have you, you know, and all the edges are nicely broken. There's a radius in the lead in, you know, and these sort of areas and what have you. But yeah, that would have been an early turn-in project and filing and fitting project as a sort of first-year apprentice to make your own tap wrench. But that's not the interesting one. This one I was given by one of the old-timers. Can't remember the guy's name now, but it was, yeah, it could have been, I can remember several of the old-timers that were there when I was an apprentice, but which one gave me this I don't recall offhand. Now, you know these, a lot of the American YouTubers, they swear by their Greenfield taps. I think A-Bomb particularly, he loves his Greenfield tap wrenches, and I think he's got every size, or working towards every size. Anyway, this one's got a bit of an interesting history. I don't know if I can bring in, let me see if I can focus in. So this one, I don't know whether you can make it out, but it's Chatwin, and it's got 1944, and it's got the War Department issue arrow on it, and then the letters CC. So I believe this would have been issued to various engineering companies, or these would have been issued to engineering companies for help with the war effort during the Second World War. And obviously, War Department issue 1944, this would have been right at the very end of it, you know, it was pretty much finished. But Chatwin is the make. I believe they went out and were bought out by somebody else, but they're a company out of Birmingham, England. And yeah, 1944 War Department issued tap wrench. Bring it back out again. I've had it, again, 35 years, get pushing half its life, and it's 75 years old and still working well. I think I need to give it a bit of TLC, don't you? You know, polish a bit of this, what's it off, maybe re-blacken it, strip it down, give it a good clean out. Just out of respect for its 75 years of age. And I've tapped, I'd shudder to think how many holes I've tapped with this tap wrench. You know, anything sort of M10, M12, back into the days when I was, you know, using a lot of the Imperial threads. But it's done a lot of work in its time, and it's still going strong. So, yeah, even though the Greenfield taps, and or the Greenfield tap wrenches that the Americans like are very good, just goes to show that the Brits can make stuff that lasts as well. Anyway, I'll get on and tap those holes. I did say I'd had a tidy up. Well, it's a lot better than it was. Somebody picked me up the other day I had the double sockets in my sockets in the wall, so I had 2 plugs in each socket. Yeah, not the best practice. As it happened, the one had the lathe and the overhead light. Let me bring you out. I've got an overhead light here. Let's see if I can bring it in shot. No, it won't quite reach. So it wasn't using much. The other one is just the DRO and the drill plugged in, so the DRO uses very little, so I wasn't overloading the sockets. But yeah, better to just have one. And I've transferred the lathe plug. I've got another set of sockets at the other end of the lathe, and the lathe is now plugged in that end. And I've just dropped it down to 2. I am planning on redoing the wiring here in my shed, because you're always short of sockets no matter what, and I'm going to stick another double one in next to that one, so that'll get rid of that problem. Well, there's my setup. It's not the prettiest in the world, and this isn't a how-to video, it's just what I'm doing, and to get me out of trouble, make it up as you go along, my normal story. So I've got a couple of sets of lathe tool bits, well, high-speed steel bits. I've measured them up as sets, and they're pretty much, you know, identical stacks. The part clamped on top, bridge clamp over the top, and the 2 M8 threads. A couple of old coach bolts I found with some nuts and washers, clamping it down. I've clocked the face square, and it's chalk and cheese to what it was before. Look, I got 10 thou cut on here. I will be kind to it. Luckily I didn't damage that cutter, it was a new cutter. And, well, as you can see, it's just ploughing it through. There's no jumping around, no nothing. And I'm really going for it here. I wouldn't want to take a deeper cut. I'm not going too fast with the cutter, I'm going about 800. I'll break through the other side, just take it gently. Back the other way. Let me just break this cutter off the top. Now, of course, the problem with this, I'll just switch it off. Problem with this is there's no, well, theoretically, there's no height adjustment. But there is, because I can shim up and down with the block. So, as it happens, this particular stack up is about, looking with the sticky pin again, about 0.1 of a millimetre too high on the 12mm cutter from centre line. This is just pure luck. So what I'm going to do is take it to depth. I've decided about 14mm deep for my slot. And that's going to be offset, the block's offset upwards by 0.1 of a millimetre. If I then flick the block round 180 degrees, put it back on, square it up, I can remachine the other face, and that'll give me a finished size of, well, a theoretical 12.2mm. We'll see how it goes. I might have to shim it up a bit, because I'd like to aim for around 12.5, but I can play with that at a later date. I mean, a couple of, you know, 0.1 shims under either side, I could sort it out, but I thought I'll rough it out first at this height. So yeah, I mean, if you're in trouble, and you haven't got a setup that'll work, basically, I've clamped the workpiece direct to my cross slide, theoretically, using the intermediate plate, which I can put any number of holes in. And I'm very tempted to make myself up an intermediate plate that bolts onto my cross slide, like a mini pallet with a, you know, series of M6 and M8 holes all over the place. And that would give me, you know, all sorts of variations on how I could clamp a vise or clamp anything onto the cross slide for future use. So yeah, that might be a project I'm going to do in the future. I think if I were to do that, I'd probably hang on until the days when I've got a milling machine. But then again, why would I need a mini pallet on the lathe for milling if I got a milling machine? Anyway, I'm just waffling and I'm going to get on with it. So yeah, I'll just loosen the carriage. There we go. 0.25mm, a tenth out. I'm not going to rush it. I've put a lot of time into the block so far, and I don't want to mess it up. The little crash mark that's on the part, I'm not worried about that, because it's going to be removed by a radius that goes on there later. So yeah, I wasn't worried about machining back the front face at this stage, because the radius is going to remove all that crash damage anyway. Yeah, I mean, this is far, far superior to the way I had it before, which was let's face it, an awful setup. Oh. But the setup for the dovetail was fine, but yeah, the setup for the trying to do the slot in the end was awful. Hands up for that one. Anyway, I'll give you a shot of the cut. Let's just put the cut on, here we go, another 10,000. It's always at this stage of a job where you tend to get brave and think, oh well, let's try half a mil, and then it all goes belly side up. But yeah, I mean, that is loving its life. I mean, the milling cutter is stuck out too far, but we explained that it won't go any further into the collet. I think if the cutter was further back in the collet, I'd probably risk maybe a mil cut at a time, I suppose, but we'll see. I suppose I could cut the back end off the milling cutter, I suppose, with a slitting disc, so that it would drop back, but again, one of these fine days, I may get a milling machine. On the story of that, strangely enough, just bring this cut off, I was offered last week a milling machine. A viewer had a Walco Major, I think it was, something like that, milling machine, and he offered that I could have it free of charge. It needed a bit of TLC, but it was all there and all working. Now, the only problem is if, I think a Walco Major, I looked it up, weighs about 300 kilograms, and will take up probably about a cubic metre of room. And it's a metre high in its own right. I mean, the bed, as it moves back and forward, is going to be over a metre, and it's about a metre deep, you know, from the back to the front. Well, there's no way it was going to fit in my shed, so sadly I had to decline the guy's offer. You know, more than generous offer. He was basically, it was come and get it job. So Rob, if you're watching, I have replied to you already, but you know, what a generous offer. Thank you very much for the offer, but I'm afraid it just wouldn't be practical for me in this little shed. And I have got room for expansion with another shed, but sort of like a lean-to or an extension on this one, out the one way. The only problem is, there are other machines I'd like to have as well, and that machine would take up basically any spare capacity I'm likely to have now or in the future, so yeah. But what an offer, eh? So yeah, I'm going to carry on with this. 10 thou cuts at a time, not being greedy, and I'll bring you back when we're done. Just a little note, guys. I'm doing all this machining, what have you. I'm not using the lead screw or the feeds or anything like that. It's always worth, if you're not using it, just loosen off your banjo and disengage your feed train. And then you haven't got all your gears turning, you know, all that wear that could occur, you know, all the spindles, all the lubrication of your lead screw, everything else. If it's not turning, it's just stationary, you basically just moved it out of the equation. So, I can't remember, did I tighten it back up? Yeah, just take it out of mesh, make sure that it's completely out of mesh. Don't bring it right out because you can't put the end cover on. But yeah, I mean, it's worth doing if you know you're not... I always struggle with this if I'm not looking. It's worth doing if you know that you're not going to be using your lead screw. I've got very little clearance there. Sometimes that tag drops around and it starts rubbing on my little aluminium washer for the drawbar. But never mind, that's just a little note anyway. So, right, onwards and upwards. Of course, a further advantage of that is listen how quiet it is now. Hang on. Bottom speed 100. I'm in low range. I actually get 1570, 1590 in low range, now that everything's sort of bedded in. I don't normally get that much with a gear train going. So I get 82 to 'Yeah, it's basically going up to 1600 in low range. I might even get like 3200 in high range, but I wouldn't want to run it that fast. But how much quieter is that? Oh, it's quite peaceful in here now. I should do that more often. I've been thinking. Dangerous, that is. Really, really dangerous. Anyway, I've been machining this away, taking my time. I'm at, where am I? Just over halfway. I'm 7 mil deep now. This is probably the most rigid setup I've had in all the time I've been milling on this lathe. It's rock solid. I did, when I did the quick change tool post, I had this bolted down and fly cut the outside edges. That was a really rigid setup as well. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only way or even the best way to do this sort of work, or this sort of what's it. What I am saying, it's what I've come up with off the cuff, so to speak. And this idea, you know, where you've got a clamp, or even, you know, a couple of, you know, if you've got milling clamps or whatever, you're unlikely to have milling clamps if you haven't got a miller. And if you've got a miller, you wouldn't be doing this on a lathe. But, yeah. But what I'm saying is that for my particular use, on this particular day, this is working absolutely superb. And somebody might find this idea to do something completely different. You know, when you're stuck with something, it's just an idea where you've got the part clamped directly onto the saddle, like a sub plate, yeah, to do a specific job. You know, it's a get you out of trouble job, and that's what I've done here. If I had a decent vise for my, you know, a sized vise for my milling head, I might have been able to swivel the milling head sideways. There's a million and one ways to do it. All I'm saying is this is what I've come up with, guys, and it's working brilliantly. So, onwards and upwards. Put a bit of cutting juice in after the cut, run the cutter back through, it stays in the slot and it's there ready for the next cut. It's easier than trying to squirt it on the cutter when it's out in the open, and I can't get in the back edge. So yeah, that's why you see me doing it after the cut is done, so to speak. Yeah, it's not going to take a quarter as long as I thought it would. I did try a half mil deep cut. It was alright, but I went a bit slower. I tried a mil deep cut. It was alright, but I went probably half the speed again. So, yeah, I'm in no rush. It's leaving a lovely finish. These little pecks are 10 thou at a time, or a quarter mil. You'll notice I speak in both languages. I'll say 0.25 1 minute, and I'll say 10 thou the next. My apprenticeship was an old British company, and everything was imperial. So I was taught, you know, Whitworth, TPI, all that sort of thing, rather than metric pitches, metric sizes. Everything was imperial. A few years later, we started to get in some, I think they were German and Japanese press tools into the company. Doing jobs, you know, contract work, and everything was in metric. All the drawings were in metric, everything was in metric. And right down to the point where nobody had a set of metric Allen keys. Everybody, there was probably a couple of thousand imperial Allen keys around the factory. This is a factory with, at the time, probably 1,000 people working there. And nobody in the whole place had a set of metric Allen keys. So yeah, over the years, metrics come in more and more, especially with the European situation, where everything's metric. So yeah, I grew up with imperial. I had to translate everything to metric as we went along. and now I'm sort of what would you call it? Measurementally ambidextrous. How does that sound? That's not something you can throw into everyday conversation. Anyway, I'll get on with this and come back, guys. Okay, that's 10 mil deep. Actually, I've been thinking again. That's the trouble when you get a job like this where you're just going back and forth, your mind starts to go. Mind you, at my age, my mind's starting to go anyway. Right. The other day, I said I would put some links up underneath to the 3 guys I shouted out for. Uploaded the video. I mean, I'm not hugely computer literate. I get by. I can do, you know, I can edit the videos, I can put them together, I can mess with it, play with it, upload it, do all that sort of thing. No problem. I know how to find the links, I can copy the links, I can paste them, what have you, no worries whatsoever. My issue is, and I see other people do it, their link will come up directly underneath the YouTube button. So this is for YouTube creators. If you could just let me know if I'm right here. I haven't tried it yet, but when you're uploading a video to YouTube, when it's processing, doing its thing or what have you, there's a box under there that says tags, or something like that. It says tags, e.g. Albert Einstein, that sort of thing. Is that where you put the links? So, if any of you know, or anybody's watching who are creators, just let me know in the comments below, and then at least in the future I'll know where to drop the links. What I did on this occasion, I had to upload the video and what have you and put the links in as a comment from A's workshop, which is not the ideal way to do it when I've said I'm going to put a link up. Anyway, so enough about that. I've been thinking again, dreadful, isn't it? Get on with it. Before I strip this down and turn it over, I thought I'd just flash across the front face to make sure that it's all in the same orientation as the slot that I just cut. At least I know when if I clock that front face up when I turn it over, it's all in line, so to speak. A little single point tool, fly cutting. In fact, it's got a big radius on because it's one I use for aluminium, but for the couple of thou I'm taking off here, it literally is, that's 0.1 I've taken off. There we go. Oh, I'll just show you that fly cutter. Yeah, I'm a single point. As you can see, it's got a great big radius on the end of it. You know, a lot sharper than that would be better. It wouldn't be quite so bangy. Yeah, I mean, it's a fly cutter. It's one I made myself for a job at some point. Yeah, happy days. So that's the slot done to depth. I actually went for like 13.25, 13 mil. I went 13.25 and I left a bit on for machining that off just to flatten it off. Anyway, happy days. So I'm ready to break it down now. Remove all the burrs, turn it over and do the other side, or the under face of this, rather than do the other side. I just want to machine it so that they're equal about. They won't quite work out because I have a step here, but not a problem. Came across a small problem when I turned it over, in that the bolts weren't long enough. So basically just run a die up the rest of the bolt. I've done it on that one, and that one's ready to go. I'm just going to do this one. So that's the other one sorted out. Just nip that down. Right, all I'm going to do now is square it up. Handy thing living in Wales, there's never any shortage of dies. Right, okay, I think that's enough of the jokes. So I'm going to do my usual. I'll get a parallel block in here. I'll find something that'll do the job. And square it up against the headstock. It's going to be a much quicker operation, this one. I can take a mil per pass because I'm only taking off a bit off that bottom base. I did a 1/2 mil and it hardly noticed it, so I did another 1 mil and that was fine. So we're 2.5 mil deep now, and it's loving life. There's the finished slot. Came out quite tidy. The slot itself, nothing wrong with that. Now you can see the bit of damage I had where I had the crash earlier, but there's going to be a radius on this corner and it'll take all that out, so I'm not worried about that. So I got away with that one, should we call it. Thicknesses, because I machined this area here that was all square and to the world with the dovetail, this space here is higher up, this bit, because I couldn't reach it when I was doing that in one hit. So that's left this space slightly thicker than this one. So I've got a thickness here of, I think it's about 5.5, and this one's 6 mil. Ideal world had it been 6 mil both sides, but there you go, I'm not worried because I'm making the matching parts that are going to fit inside. So I suppose my next step would be coming up with a cunning plan as to where I'm going to put what size and where I'm going to put these two holes. I'm thinking 6 mil. Something like that, 6 mil pins. Yeah, I would have thought that'll do it. I mean, there should be more than strong enough because I'm only planning on using a maybe 6 or 8 mil thread to pull the two together. I haven't come to that decision yet. So, yeah, we'll mark out a likely position for the 2 pins. I think the 2 pins that hold the arms are going to be held in with a grub screw, one there perhaps. In fact, I think as it sits that way, and this is the headstock end when it's working, I think we'll put the grub screws on the away side from the headstock end. So anyway, we'll get on with that next. Well, I think that's about it for this episode. I don't know how long it's going to be. When it comes out in the edit, we'll find out. Hey, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you all soon.